understanding between U.S. school communities and international communities, and develop lasting ties to provide opportunities for U.S. students to learn critical foreign languages from a native speaker, as well as develop in-depth cultural knowledge of China and Egypt.
أنا اسمي أحمد وأنتِ؟
أنا اسمي كوين.
مرحبا كوين.
مرحبا.
Very good.
Additionally, the program enables exchange teachers to learn firsthand about U.S. culture and U.S. teaching methodologies.
I learned educational systems here. I learned how the teachers teach, how the students learn here in the American high school.
U.S. host schools receive ongoing program monitoring and support, visa support for the exchange teacher, monthly maintenance allowances and medical insurance for the exchange teacher, and multi-day orientations and professional development workshops throughout the year.
TCLP program has really helped launch our program. We were a fledgling Chinese program here. We had a great dream, and with the current economic state, not a lot of funding, not a lot of places to get started. So the richness of the teachers, the support, the training that TCLP has offered has been invaluable to helping us get our program off the ground.
Bring students from Egypt to America and teachers from America to Egypt, teachers from Egypt to America. This will bridge the gap. This will make better understanding, mutual understanding based on the respect between the two nations. I think that this is the kind of work that I love to do.
To apply to host an international teacher of Mandarin or Arabic, please visit www.tclprogram.org.
Okay. So hopefully that gave you a nice idea of some of the experiences that past groups have had through this program, and I will just pull our PowerPoint back up. Okay, and now without any further ado, the best people to talk to today about hosting a teacher is someone who has, of course, been through this experience before. And we are fortunate enough to be joined today by two TCLP alumni who have played integral roles in their schools and hosting teachers. And they're going to share with you a little bit, about their experience in the past. So for both of you, Charlotte and Bridget, I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourselves, talk about your school that you work in, the years that you participated in TCLP, and perhaps a little bit of background information about the language program at your school. And if you don't mind, Bridget, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. So my name is Bridget Beach, and I'm the World Language Coordinator at the Sal Language Academy in Chicago. We are a K-8 public magnet school, and we've had Chinese for quite a few years, but our Chinese program was understaffed. And so whereas in our French, Spanish, and Italian students, we had 2 teachers for each language, and for Chinese we only had 1. And so we really felt that our students taking Chinese were kind of being underserved. And so when we heard about this program from, I believe, the Confucius Institute of Chicago a couple of years ago, we thought, let's give it a try. And it's a lengthy and complicated application, but we settled down to it as a group with the principal and myself and a community liaison, and worked away at it and sent it in, and we're over the moon to get selected. It's quite competitive, but we understand that it's taxpayer money, and therefore it has to be a very thorough process. So we took it really seriously. We've now had a TCLP teacher last year and another one this year, and it's been a fantastic experience. We love every moment of having a TCLP teacher in our school.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. And Charlotte, would you like to introduce yourself in school as well?
Sure. I'm Charlotte Regan, and I work at Buxton Center Elementary in Buxton, Maine, one of 6 elementary schools in our district, along with a very large middle school and high school. I think a little bit different than Bridget, our superintendent kind of had a vision of starting a Chinese program at the elementary level. We've just got the basic languages at high school level. And I think one of the things that stemmed from that, they had gone on some of the admin had gone on a trip to China through the College Board, and really were intrigued by the connection of connecting with schools in China, and wanted to bring that experience with having a Chinese teacher in our schools as well, and heard of the TCLP grant, and looked into applying. And like Bridget said, it is a comprehensive application, very thoughtful, and really kind of needing a plan in mind of what the vision that you want to do for your school. At the time, we wanted to introduce it at our elementary level and expose all kindergarteners and build an immersion program that kind of worked up through grades 1 into the next grades. And like she said, we were thrilled that first year that we were also a recipient, and had our first teacher from China. It was just amazing opportunity for all our kindergarten students, but not only that, for the staff, and as well as the Chinese teacher coming to the States and the things that she learned for her teaching and brought back to China. But knowing that the connection is still there, we still, respond to each other on Facebook. She has a lot of connections that she made and has kept as well as we have. So it was a great opportunity and experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Charlotte. So just a reminder to those of you who are just joining us now, if you have questions that you want to ask to any of our panelists, please remember to type them into the chat window, and either myself or one of my colleagues will address them. Both of you highlighted that TCLP is really useful for schools that are either starting a program or enhancing an existing program. So I think that that's great that you brought those different sides out, and so that all of the people who are joining us can know that this program is both for schools that don't have existing language programs, as well as for schools that are seeking to build up their existing programs. I'm going to ask each of you now to share an example, perhaps, of one of the ways that TCLP has really made a difference in your school on your students. And I don't know if
I can start.
Oh, Charlotte, great.
Like we said, our superintendent at the time, his vision was to expose all the kindergarten students, which that first year, the teacher that we had, Feng Yu, did exactly that, which was basically 17 classes of kindergarten throughout our whole district. That, like I said, makes up about 5 to 6 elementary schools. From there, we had, the goal was to have an immersion first grade classroom the following year of 20 students who were interested, as well as the parents were interested in them being in an immersion Chinese American classroom for first grade for the whole year. And we, the second year, did follow through with that, where we had 20 students. Parents were interested, kids, and they came from different towns throughout our district, and we housed it at our Buxton Center Elementary, as well as exposed the next batch of kindergarten students. We kind of re-looked at things, as you always do, and to be able to sustain it, we decided that the following year, this year, we're actually exposing 5th grade students, because we've begun it in the middle school has also begun a Chinese program, but we've continued to sustain that immersion classroom. They are now in 2nd grade, and we have a teacher working with our regular classroom teacher, and they're continuing to get Chinese every day. So it's really been a great opportunity for students that we've never had before. And the parents and the community have been excited too. And the goal is that they will continue to be a part of an immersion classroom, as well as we grow the program in the middle school and high school level.
Fantastic. That's a great story about how TCLP has made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Bridget, would you like to share an example of how TCLP has made an impact on your school and students?
Yes, absolutely. So our students, as I was saying before, the students in Chinese were being grouped together by grade level. And as a language academy, it really felt like they were not getting the same treatment. So our language teachers now, our TCLP teacher and the other Chinese teacher that we have a separate teacher for every grade level, and they can then, it's much easier for them to differentiate if they're differentiating within one grade level rather than within 2 grade levels, when you probably would need about 8 different sets of activities for the students to all be reached. So that's been really awesome. And our teacher also, because of the obligation in the program to do outreach activities, which are when the teacher instructs students who are not in their regular classroom. We've also been able to offer a Chinese club, which has been great fun. And our TCLP teacher has been able to work with students specifically for assembly performances. So they get much closer attention for that. And also reaching out to the school in lots of other ways. Our students take the same language for 9 years, but while they're taking that language, they get to observe the students learning other languages, and oftentimes by the time they've done 9 years, they're starting to think that another language is attractive. And so, maybe they get a little bored after 9 years with one language, and so our students get this taste of Chinese, and I think that when they go off to high school, a lot more of them are more likely to think about picking Chinese because they've had this little immersion to Mandarin in addition to another language. So it's been very enriching from that point of view also.
Wonderful. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the pictures that we see on the slide here.
Absolutely.
And then Charlotte will go over your pictures afterward.
Okay, so we've talked about our students, but Charlotte also mentioned the impact on the teacher. So, we are coached by TCLP and cultural differences and the differences in the education system. And from the 2 teachers we've hosted have learned that it's really quite different in China compared to the way the teachers behave in the classroom and how they plan. And so TCLP does a great job of coaching the teachers in more child-centered techniques than they're used to. And the activities that you see in the photos here are actually our own beginning of the year professional development sessions with teachers. So Yazhuan on the left is our teacher this year. She's the lady wearing the glasses. And then on the right-hand picture, she's the teacher on the left. And here we're doing 2 activities. The first one on the left, we're having to draw pictures based on verbal instructions that are given to somebody in a different room outside and then recreate them, causing much hilarity. And the second picture on the right was another icebreaker activity where our mentor teacher, the community liaison, which I'm sure we'll talk about afterwards, on the right, and Yajwan are actually holding a piece of paper between their elbows. And this was an icebreaker where they had to pick up pieces of paper and do things according to instructions being given by our very fun principal. And all of these things were great for helping Yajwan settle into the school, make friends with people, and those friendships from those first days of professional development really have kind of carried through for this year. So the school has a big role in making sure the teacher you're welcoming feels really at ease. And that's part of the application, making a plan for all of these things. It's important because if you don't have a plan, sometimes these things don't happen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's a really important point to make, that the exchange teacher does not only create an impact in the school, but the host school is really able to help support the teacher and to pave the way for global perspectives and initiatives for the students. So the host school plays a big role, and we absolutely are going to talk more about some of the things that you just brought up there in a couple later slides. So Charlotte, would you like to talk about your pictures as well?
Sure. The first picture, basically, this was kind of a special time. It was our first year with Feng Yu, our first experience with a teacher through the TCLP. And this was actually at our principal's house where she taught people how to make the hot pot, which is a huge tradition in China. And it was really a neat opportunity to learn about her culture, but share in that tradition with her. I know my principal and her family did a lot of the cooking with her, and then we reaped the benefits later. It was a great meal, but and celebrating her Chinese New Year. So kind of the cultural traditions that she brought to us as well were really exciting. The next picture basically shows her integrating with the staff as one of our fundraisers, getting involved with our backpack program for needy children. So it wasn't just her, you know, making connections with the mentoring community liaison. She really made connections throughout the whole building and our staff, as well as they did too. Another picture is last year, Wang Yu was with us through the TCLP, and this is her teaching, as I mentioned earlier, our students who are part of the Immersion program in first grade. And like I said, those same students are now in second grade. And again, I think she was really shocked because she was traditionally a middle school teacher. So the things she learned, as Bridget said, you know, the differences in education in America versus China, the things she learned and kind of surprised herself were pretty amazing in her experience teaching first graders, as it's not something she was used to. And I think she surprised herself of how easy they caught on to the language and the experience she had with them.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so for the next 15 minutes or so, we're going to talk about what potential host schools should provide to their exchange teacher. And we'll hear from our alumni about what their schools specifically did to provide support for their exchange teachers. So TCLP teachers should have a teaching schedule during the regular school hours with a minimum of 10 contact hours teaching either Mandarin or Arabic and a maximum of 20 hours teaching. So I'd like to ask both of you, what does or did your schedule look like for your exchange teacher?
Well, our teacher this year, Yajwan, is teaching 4 classes a day. They're 60 minutes long, and our regular teachers of world language teach 5 classes a day. So it's a slightly lighter load, still quite a heavy load, I think. The younger grades, so she teaches first grade, third grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade. The younger grades of 1st and 3rd are not really getting homework, so that helps lighten that a little bit. 6th and 7th are getting homework. And I know that we have talked a little about the possibilities of preparing a class on a theme and differentiating it so it can be simpler for the younger children, more challenging for the 6th and 7th, and yet still, you know, introducing them to new materials in their own ways, maybe adapting technology use, etc. for them. So that's kind of a typical day for Yajwan, and then she also would have to help with some morning duties every day, or at least 3 days a week, I believe, helping a homeroom teacher. And luckily this year we don't have to do any lunch duties or playground duties, but that is a pretty decent teaching load for a Chinese teacher.
And our teachers who taught kindergarten, in the picture to the upper left was actually Chun Li last year was teaching kindergarten, and again, originally Wang Yu there's about 15 to 17 kindergarten classes throughout the district. So I made her schedule around that with classes 30 to 40 minutes long. Because it was housed at our school, we actually did she taught each of our 5 classrooms twice a week, 30 minutes, and then the other classes that traveled were like 40 minutes. So it was quite an extensive teaching day, 5 days a week, as well as a lunch duty once a week, staff meetings, and around that, any block of time we built outreach in, which was basically visiting other classrooms in our building around the district, middle school, high school, to share outreach with other classrooms as part of the outreach hours.
Great, and we'll get to talking about outreach a little bit more specifically shortly. So a question that I want to ask to both of you also is, did your exchange teacher find it difficult to adapt the schedule you provided for them? And how did you support them with this transition?
I think I'll start. Well, I remember the first year with Wang Yu. I think at first it might be a little bit more extensive than what they're used to in China. We were warned about that they can have breaks during the middle of the day and they have time in their office as well. So it was a pretty rigorous teaching schedule. And maybe in the beginning it was an adjustment, but as long as there's support there, they pretty much were able to keep up with the schedule. And I know, like in the pictures as well here, this is last year's Wang Yu as part of the first grade classroom, and that schedule looked a little bit different because as part of the Immersion, she was actually teaching, kind of co-teaching with that teacher. We had her teach math and science, and then even a little bit of a, mostly math and science and social studies were kind of in the Chinese, and she also helped with literacy, but then did a lot of outreach in other classrooms. So overall, it was an extensive schedule, but they all adopted pretty well.
Great, and I think that's a great comment that with adequate support, these teachers can absolutely adjust and thrive. So that's great. Bridget, would you like to also address that question?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to reiterate, I think that TCLP does a really good job on checking in with us as the mentor teachers, checking in with the guest teachers. We have to every month report together on the activities that we've done, and we're encouraged to make scheduled meetings once a week. And so again, with that sense that if it's not scheduled, sometimes maybe it doesn't happen. So these things help to kind of ground the program and make sure that it stays on track and that the teacher is getting the support that they need. And, it's a long way from home for them too. So you can't really treat your TCLP teacher as if they were just another regular American colleague. They kind of need their hand to be held somewhat. But it's also from this kind of hand holding at the beginning comes a very rich and rewarding experience. So you make these kind of deep friendships that are different to the kind of acquaintanceships that you make with many teachers. So it's great. If we look at these two pictures here, so the first one, the bigger picture, Yajwan is teaching an outreach class to a first grade class, and I think we're going to talk about that afterwards. In the one at the bottom, this was at the very beginning of the year, and we invited Yajwan to come to our local school council, which is the group of parents and administrators that manages the school, to present the TCLP program. And so she then kind of explained what kind of the curriculum that she would be doing, but also the outreach and ideas for events to host with parents and cooking parties, etc., so that we could help her impact go beyond the classroom.
Fantastic. And since we've been talking so much about outreach, why don't we address that right now? Because I'm sure there might be some folks who are listening and wondering about that. So exchange teachers are required to do this thing called outreach, and outreach can consist of scheduled presentations or activities in the host school, other schools in the area, or the outside in the community, where and this is outside of the exchange teachers' regularly scheduled language classes. And outreach activities are focused on building awareness and knowledge of your exchange teacher's home country, language, and culture. So that's essentially what outreach is. And Bridget, would you like to talk about some successful outreach activities that have been conducted by some of your exchange teachers?
Yes, absolutely. So last year and this year, our TCLP teachers done a Chinese club after school. And that has been great. Like students who signed up again this year, new teacher, but they liked it so much last year that they came back to enjoy it with a different teacher. Last year we did some great sessions with the Girl Scouts, and so they did some really nice stuff for Chinese New Year, and I think that last year's teacher also took them to Chinatown. Then we have one of our favorite things is I'm setting up Yajwan right now to work with our social studies teacher who does a unit on ancient China. And so she will go into the homeroom classes when they have social studies and work with that teacher there. So it's kind of cross-curricular. And we're very much looking forward to our fundraising event. This year we're going to do a big Chinese New Year event. And so obviously Yashwan's going to bring a lot of authenticity to that event. So trying to get her exposed to parents and students that are not learning Chinese, and then also people outside the community through the Girl Scouts troop.
Fantastic. And Charlotte, how about, would you like to also share your experience with outreach?
Sure. Our district is so large, and our school is very large as well. So some of the outreach was actually done in other grade levels, as Bridget mentioned, which the kids really enjoyed, that weren't necessarily getting the Chinese every day, but that had visits, outreach, and a lot of classrooms invited them back, and including at the middle school and high school, especially as Bridget mentioned too, with the middle school doing certain units that kind of went with the cultural experience of having a Chinese teacher come in. They would invite them to come and share some cultural things that went along with their units. One of the successful ones too was through our adult education program. I know Chung Lee did cooking classes last year that were quite a hit, and where she taught them to adults that had signed up. We had a couple of big nights the past 2 years through our parent-teacher organization with organized Chinese events. And I know that last year, Wang Yu was part of our drama production of The Lion King, because within that play there are some cultural things that she really helped the students understand better through the play, and she was part of that. And our first year, actually there were some fifth graders that wanted their own tutoring and actually set up weekly opportunities, which was kind of an outreach opportunity for Wang Yu. They actually had their own little private tutoring of Chinese of fifth grade students that would meet with her regularly and weekly. So that was kind of neat. So those are some of the ones I can think of offhand. Yep.
Yeah, those are some great examples of different types of outreach.
Yep.
Thank you. So the last thing I want to talk about in relationship to TCLP and the host school is professional development opportunities. And TCLP offers several workshops and professional development for exchange teachers throughout the year, and also some of which include the host school representatives. So a pre-departure orientation for exchange teachers, as well as a 9-day-long orientation in Washington, D.C. that includes a component that invites the U.S. mentor teachers to come to D.C. as well for part of that to get training, intercultural training, and exchange teachers are provided with training on methodologies, strategies, a practicum workshop, as well as cultural adjustment training. But host schools also provide professional development opportunities for their exchange teachers in various ways. So could you both briefly talk about some of the school professional development opportunities that your exchange teachers had?
Yep. Right now we've been doing a lot of looking at data at our school, and I think that's something that is a very different approach for Yajwan, that the idea of teachers and administrators in a school looking at test scores and, I hate to say it, test scores, but, looking together as a school at how we can help support school test scores through world language, etc. So that's been one interesting thing. Last year we hosted in Chicago the Central States Conference on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, so we were able to all go to that together, which was great. And this year we're going to be holding the Magnet Schools of America Conference in Chicago, so we will all again go to that, and that'll be a terrific opportunity for Yajwan to experience a professional group. So that's just for starters. How about you, Shat?
Well, the fact that you mentioned data, one of the things that our school has done for the past, we're in our third year of really looking at literacy data and working with a literacy consultant of having our kids reading, 90% of our kids at Benchmark leaving kindergarten and working that through first and second. So our Chinese teachers actually have been part of that work as well. And also, I think the big ones, we do a lot of, on our professional development days, using teachers and staff of the district, a lot of technology sessions that they've been able to be a part of in learning the tricks and trade of technology and how to best utilize it in instruction. I know we had a balanced literacy type workshop, or we had a consultant come in that I believe last year's exchange teachers were part of. A big one is we have for all new teachers, we do a new teacher orientation in August, which we invite and make them a part of too, which is really helpful because obviously they're a new teacher along with all our other new staff. And just really a lot of, and helping them acclimate to the school as well. Any ongoing district professional development, staff development, they're always a part of as well.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I do want to make sure that we have time to go over the application, but first I want to talk a little bit about life in the host community. And so schools are able to apply for either fully funded or partially funding, which means that schools can get a teacher schools can offer to cost share part of the expenses associated with having a teacher. They can offer to cover housing costs, or they can offer to pay for a larger percentage of the program, or they can also apply for fully funding, which means that they only have to provide minimal expenses such as cost of certification and cost for having a substitute teacher, for example. However, all schools are responsible for helping their exchange teacher to find housing. That's something that is, of course, really important, living arrangements. So could you talk briefly about where your exchange teachers lived and how you went about helping them to find accommodations?
I had a kind of a hard time for this last year finding families from school to offer to help with the housing. And it's really hard in a big city to kind of book or reserve an apartment when the person's not there. Mm-hmm. So we were really trying to find families that would be able to host. And I realized that most of the families in our school need all the rooms they have in their homes for their family. And so I realized if I started to reach out to kind of alumni parents, I might have more luck because their children have been off to college. And it worked really well. And I very quickly, once I had this brainwave, very quickly found a parent of some students who left maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And this lady was only too happy to have a lodger in her house right by school. So very, very convenient. And it's been a great situation. They've made a very close friendship. And it's worked out really well. So in the future, while always, if I were able to be part of the program again, I mean, I would still try and look for a variety of housing as you kind of require of us to give the teacher options. But I would remember the trick of thinking of people who don't have a house full of young children, possibly having more room.
Great. Charlotte, would you like to answer that question as well?
Sure.
Or talk a little bit about...
Yeah, I think in our past couple years experience, the big thing has really, we've really kind of tried to go with what the exchange teachers' preferences were, but like Bridget said, that can be difficult. Buxton is rural, but we do have Portland, a city kind of within 20 miles, 30 minutes. So it is, if they want more of an urban experience, which our first teacher did actually, we had, I think having the transitional housing set up is really key. And we had that set up and knowing that it could, with a family, but no kids, and it was kind of out in not a lot of things around her per se. And coming from a larger city in China, I could quickly see that she wasn't that comfortable. So I think it's really key in knowing what their preferences are too, and having some things to lean on. I mean, that first year we actually did go through a couple different placements until we found a place that she was really settled and felt comfortable with. So But I think, like Bridget said, having something in your back pocket to lean on is key. But for her, like I said, in Portland was where she wanted to be, so we had teachers help commute her. Now, last year we had 2 families right here in Buxton, and actually for us, I think more families volunteer when they have kids because they like the kids to be part of the experience, and especially if they're actually getting part of the Chinese class. Last year there was a kindergartner student who also was with the family that Wang Yu was at, and oh, there they are right there. We had 2 families that wanted to start with the transitional, and we knew there was a good likelihood that they wanted to just do the whole year. And Wang Yu in the peach sweater, she embraced that opportunity. She just loved it. You know, living with a family right there in Buxton was what she really liked. Whereas our first teacher, I don't think would have been as happy with that. She was happy being more in the city. And then Chung Lee enjoyed that experience too, until I know sometimes they can have the option of their family coming. And with that, when that happens, then it's getting their own housing, which she did for her family, but enjoyed the opportunity living with a host family. The biggest thing for us, but like I said, I agree with what Bridget's saying too, is really looking at what their preference is. And when you get, if you get a teacher and as part of the packet that comes to get to know them, you always hear what their preference is. And that's key in having that ahead of time and trying to get your ducks in order of having some opportunities and some options for them. That's kind of, it was different each year for us.
Yeah, great.
But successful.
Yeah,
great, thank you. You provided, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, this last year when I read the profile, it said that the Yashwan said she wanted to live independently. So I was looking really hard for independent living situations. But then when I actually met her, she's like, oh no, I really think I want to live with someone. And both years.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Bridget, because I experienced that too. As much as you get that information ahead of time, sometimes that does change once they get here. Yep.
It's when they realize how just, really on their own they are. Then the idea of having a friendly face to go home to, I think, kind of is very comforting. And I think both years, it's been really great. So
I think that you've both just highlighted something that is so essential in being a host school, is being flexible and being able to really think about lots of different aspects of making sure that your exchange teacher will feel welcomed and at home in your community. So thank you so much for those stories and examples.
I don't know, are you going to talk about the transitional piece again?
Nope, we're not going to talk about that right now. That's something that is usually addressed after the application process is over. So we won't get into that too much today. If people have questions, they can feel free to type it in the chat window. But one thing I would like to talk about before we move on to talking about the application is making sure that your exchange teacher comes into an engaged and supportive community. So schools are required to appoint an individual to serve as a community liaison who will help the teacher to adjust to life in the new community. So I was wondering if both of you could talk a little bit about who is your community liaison, how you identified that individual, and how your exchange teacher was able to get involved with the community while they were in your schools. Bridget, perhaps you'd like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year we had another teacher who ended up getting pregnant during the year and wasn't very available. So I knew I needed to change this year. And I basically kind of went to the people who'd shown the most interest in someone coming from another culture and asked them. And so I ended up with a terrific community liaison this year who's done a lovely job. Community liaison does not have the responsibility of helping in terms of curriculum or supporting, within the academic structure, but more on the social plus getting acclimated to, different environment. And so this year, our community liaison has done a really nice job of introducing Yashwan to fun things to do in the city, and especially family events. Invited her for Hanukkah, and it's been really enriching, I think, for her to build this other relationship with this other teacher and the teacher's family. And I've been very grateful to have that support. And whenever I have something, if I'm feeling a little unavailable, like I'm going away for the weekend or for a school vacation, then I'll make sure that the community liaison is there. And also the transitional families, transitional hosts at the beginning have continued to be terrific also.
Great. I think that's a great point, that it's important to have lots of community support and lots of people who are interested in doing things with your exchange teacher and making them feel welcome. Charlotte, would you like to talk a little bit about your experience?
Sure. I know the first year when they applied for the grant, it was our principal at the time who actually, I believe, was the community liaison. And not that it needs to be an administrator, absolutely not. I think more of it was her personality was perfect for it, because she is kind of an upbeat, and gets out and goes out a lot. And she also was the one that made sure that when Feng Yu got here, that she got her banking, her Social Security, and did all the little logistics that she needed to do, as well as did a lot of lunch dates, or just got her out and involved in things. So I think, like Bridget said, as long as it's someone who is kind of outgoing and likes to get out and do things and help them kind of get acclimated to the community, that's a good choice of someone.
Absolutely. And I think those are some great examples of how your exchange teacher can get involved, just going out to lunch, learning more about some of the things that are available to do in the community are really important. So thank you so much. I also want to talk a little bit about the application. So for the last maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions, I'd like us to talk a little bit about the application process and what your experiences were like applying for the program. So if you could talk a little bit about maybe how long it took your school to finish the application, and tell us a little bit about your experience putting together those resources.
Well, our principal took charge of the whole certification part, since she is used to doing that all the time, dealing with coaching new teachers to the Chicago public schools and what they need to get done. So she took care of all of that, and I pretty much did the rest. It does require thinking about it ahead of time, because you have to get resumes from the administrator, from the community liaison, for yourself if you're the mentor teacher. And so you cannot leave it until the last moment. Mm-hmm. But once you kind of crack the application open and start working at it, it's doable. You just can't leave it until 2 days before. It also needs sort of a district supervisor signature approving the application. So I would say you need to have the whole thing finished at least a week before the due date, so that you have time to get the requisite signatures.
And I'll add to that, I was not part of the application process, just asked to be a mentor. But I know I actually reached out to our former principal at the time and asked her, just had a conversation with her recently about her thoughts, because she was a big part of the application process the first year and the second year. And her sharing was that it's a very thoughtful application, similar to what Bridget has said. And, there's a lot of thinking involved in ahead of time, knowing what your short and long-term plans are and ideas behind it and what you're going to do. It's not necessarily the writing of the application, but the thinking involved around it. It's comprehensive. And I think, like she said, and Bridget kind of said this, it's not necessarily a 2-hour application you're going to bang out, but it's more thoughtful and does take time, but it's doable.
Absolutely. I think it is definitely doable. And just a reminder to everyone listening, the deadline for host schools is January 22nd. So you do still have time to finish your applications. And I think that it's definitely true as well that we do ask for the application to be thoughtful. That is really what we're looking for. We want to see schools that have really given some consideration to things like who they're going to choose as a mentor teacher, who they're going to choose as a community liaison, what their plan might be for helping their exchange teacher to adjust to the community. So those are all really important. Thank you for bringing up those points. Would you both be able to share with us a little bit about your experience during the interview stage of the application process, and perhaps how your school prepared for this?
Well, you need to plan time for it and make sure you remember the time zone. important factor for being in Chicago. No, I mean, it was not unduly difficult. It just, you have to really want to do this application. And I believe that if you really want to do it and you enjoy embracing diversity, and the kind of commitment to kind of showing your guest teacher, like the richness of your culture, and in the small C and a capital C, and the school needs to be committed to that. And as long as you have the people on board who embrace that kind of thing, then I think you can make a really good and valid application.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Bridget. The interview process was, nothing out of the ordinary. I think the big thing is, as long as you've had a thoughtful, had thought going into the application and know what it is, your goals and your vision, and what you've included in the application, really that's just sharing that in the interview with the questions that are asked. So again, it's just having that thoughtfulness ahead of time and knowing what your plans are and to be able to share that.
And I think I've also kind of learned that the TCLP can be quite flexible too, as long as you have a plan. If you say, well, this might be a little difficult for us to work out at this time, you have to have a plan to how to overcome an obstacle. But TCLP will be understanding and actually like to give you guidance and how to, overcome some things like that. So that's been great to learn. Because before you've ever applied, you don't really know the organization, and because it's such a serious application, you have no way of knowing that. But there are real people behind these application forms.
Well, thank you, Bridget. That's a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that. Definitely supportive organization, top notch.
Well, thank you. And I think that is true. We do want to work with the schools, so long as you are able to show us that in the application that the school is really serious and invested in making the program a success. We will always try to support schools in whatever way that we can. So thank you. And at this point, we only have a few minutes left, so I'd like to open the floor up for questions. If anyone who has been listening has any questions that they'd like to type into the chat window, please do so, and we can get our lovely panelists' responses. In the meantime, while we're waiting, do either of you have any thoughts on maybe some extra advice that you would give to potential applicants that maybe we haven't already covered?
I was just going to share, if people are seriously looking into developing a language program, elementary, middle school, just starting one out, or enhancing one, that this is a great place to do it through the TCLP. I think, like Bridget said, the support and the training and the quality of the teachers, and not just the teachers, but the additional training that they continue to get through the TCLP is, like I said, top notch. And I'm not sure that there are other programs around that give the quality that you guys do.
Yeah.
Sorry, my daughter's making noise.
I would agree with that. It's really comprehensive support that's given on both sides, actually. And the training, the intensive training in Washington, I guess in maybe a little in Beijing, but then I believe the 9 days in Washington when they arrive, it's really fabulous. They get, sometimes I think, man, maybe our whole staff should come along and join in and get a refresher in your coaching and child-centered techniques and introducing technology, and you really did a good job. One last thing, in terms of commitment of the host school, the mentor teacher does have to be available to go to Washington, D.C. for a couple of days. around about mid-August, and then also to go to Baltimore or to go to another city for the fall workshop. So there are, you know, some requirements of having availability for time. But as long as you're able to do that, that's been also fun and enriching and nice getting to know the whole group.
That's a great point. And I think that what you both have demonstrated, but perhaps we haven't actually explicitly said, is that something that is so essential to the success of the TCLP program at a different school is the mentor teacher, and having a truly committed and enthusiastic mentor teacher who is really invested in the program. So I would like to thank you both for your dedication to making the program a success at your various schools. So any other questions specifically for our panelists today? You have given us a lot of information and a lot of things to consider, so I'm sure people are just mulling that over. And just a reminder to everyone listening that, let's see, I will advance the slide. And if anyone does have any questions about the application or anything that we heard about today, you can certainly either visit our website, TCLprogram.org, or give our office a call, or send us an email, and we are always happy to answer your questions. And I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I don't believe we have any other questions for our panelists, but please keep in mind that the deadline again is January 22nd. And I would like to say a great thank you to our alumni, Charlotte and Bridget. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences today.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
And thank you everyone for joining us today. And we welcome your questions and hopefully your application soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.